How is the sound? Okay. To greatly varying degrees, everyone on this planet is experiencing some form of hell on earth this year. The COVID-19 pandemic, the other events, such as the killings in this country, and all sorts of things. Everything somehow seems to be going wrong. Every day we read or hear of some new problem. Let's say problem. It is in situations like this that we need Dharma the most. Well, we need it all the time, but it's in situations like this that we hopefully become aware of it. And it seems that it's in times like this that we can actually grow. We are experiencing some kind of multi-level desperation. We are desperate. This disease and all the other horrific events of this past year have left us with no safety net, no psychologically, no safety net, and in the case of many people, economically and health-wise, of course, no safety net. So our practice, our involvement with Buddhism is now being put to the test and hopefully put to use. I thought that what we could share this weekend is a few ideas that I have heard from my many teachers of how to respond creatively and effectively to this type of crisis. This morning, I think we could begin by looking at two principal aspects of our attitude toward Dharma. And I don't use the word attitude in the pejorative sense. I just mean our outlook. And these are faith and knowledge. Probably almost everyone who's listening to this will have heard all of this before, but we are nothing if not repetitive. So, the Buddhist understanding of faith is usually threefold, sometimes fourfold. I'll use the threefold designation because that's what we find most often. One aspect of faith is belief. Another aspect of faith is desire. And a third aspect of faith is, you could say, awe or wonderment. Now, the relationship between these three is explained in a couple of ways. Sometimes it's said that they are faith for different aspects. So that, for example, Lord Gampopa says that a belief is belief in causality, causation. And that awe is your attitude toward the three jewels. That's how you feel. And desire is the desire to become a Buddha for the benefit of others. Sometimes it's explained that these are three stages in the development of faith toward any one object, whether it be your guru or the Buddha or the Dharma and so forth. But what I want to explore a little bit at the beginning of this morning is the relationship between belief, desire or aspiration, and awe or wonderment. Whether we view these as sequential developments in one person's faith toward any one object of faith or not, it seems that there must be belief to start with. Nowadays, we don't like to talk about this because it sounds very, very old-fashioned and authoritarian. But you're not going to practice meditation unless you believe that it's going to help you. And sometimes I think that we find ourselves unable to practice as much as we would like to. And sometimes that is because our belief is lacking. Now, Buddhist belief is not supposed to be taken on authority. So, and this is really brings us to the sense in which these three types of faith are not strictly sequential. We may need belief in the beginning, but when through belief you practice meditation, you start to experience awe or wonderment. You experience qualities, attributes within yourself, within your teachers, within your Dharma siblings that you had never even imagined could be possible. And that in turn obviously increases your belief. So you have a little bit of belief, well, maybe if I meditate it'll help me. And so you try it, and eventually you start to change. You start to become a slightly more decent person, hopefully. And that, in turn, gives rise to the desire or aspiration to become better, to become a better person for the good of others and for your own good. So, faith is kind of the affect, and I guess we could say triple affect, of our outlook. And the other aspect is knowledge. And we definitely need knowledge. In his communal teachings, Lord Gampopa mentions that faith without knowledge is not sufficient. And it's really knowledge that informs faith and sharpens it, guides it, and keeps it on the level, keeps it on the path. When he was teaching in Delhi, I would guess about 10 years ago, His Holiness, the Joan Karmapa, made the remark that faith without knowledge will become some form of extremism. So we need these two aspects. We need to have faith, but we also need to have knowledge. Now, knowledge does not, in this case, simply mean knowing the facts about Buddhism. It means knowing the facts, as many facts as possible, about three things: Dharma, yourself, and the world. And facts are not opinions. I have many, many opinions, but I can at least usually tell the difference between a belief, an opinion, and a fact or knowledge. And the reason why making this distinction is important is that once we lose sight of reality, of facts, our own limitations, our own foibles and defects, the problems in the society around us, then our belief becomes unmoored. I would even say unhinged. And we end up creating sort of a double delusion. We have our basic delusion, which we all have, and that's not being dealt with. And then we have this additional delusion on top of it. So this is why knowledge is so very important. And do you need me to stop? No. So that is I think, the starting point of how to deal with times of crisis. Now, we must be, faith is open. You could say faith is optimistic. Faith looks on the positive side. And knowledge looks at everything, looks at the environment. And we need both of these to deal with, well, to deal with anything, but especially to deal with crisis. Okay. I think that's enough about that. Now, I can really only talk about what I'm feeling because I can't see what other people are feeling. I can hazard a guess based upon things people say and so on, but, you know, we really only know ourselves. So I'm probably going to be talking about my feelings about this crisis. And when I look at the way I'm feeling and the way other people indicate that they're feeling, I'm basically dealing with three problems: fear, anger, and sadness. If we limit our discussion to this health crisis and its economic implications, and not that that's the only bad thing going on in the world, but let's talk about that. I am afraid of this disease. I am afraid that my child might get it, that I might get it, that other people I know might get it. I'm afraid of that. that fear is real. In other words, it comes up, disturbs me. I'm angry that we have not done better. And I'm sad. I'm sad at the loss of life. I'm sad at the increasing poverty. And I mean, who knows what the other effects of all this will be. There are basically two approaches we can take toward what we conventionally call bad or unpleasant feelings. We can try to ignore or suppress them. And usually we do that by distracting ourselves. Or we can learn to understand them. And this is where faith and knowledge come into use or play in dealing with these types of things. We have to have the faith that we can deal with our fear, our anger, and our sadness. But we also have to have the knowledge of exactly how to do this. So, what I want to look at over today and tomorrow, and hopefully share with you, are the various constructive approaches that the Buddhist tradition gives us for dealing with these feelings. Now, before we get into that, we need to be clear that if we're to be traditional for a moment, fear and sadness are aspects of the truth of suffering. Anger is an aspect of the cause of suffering. So, although we suffer when we're angry, anger also causes more and more suffering. It accumulates, causes us to accumulate karma. So we need to, I suppose, be careful in distinguishing between states of suffering and states that cause suffering. Now, sadness makes us suffer, but it's actually sadness and fear are said to be the result of previous mental states or actions. Now, when you're only doing this in one language, you really get through a lot of stuff very quickly, and then you kind of run out. Because if you go on and on and on, people fall asleep. I mean, they just can't, you know. All right. There are three or four approaches taught in the Buddhist tradition for how to deal with these things. And I think that it's easiest if we just think of them as three. I mean, you know that we love to divide and subdivide, and but basically there are three methods that we have at our disposal that really anyone can try. Now we'll get into the difficulties of this, because obviously if this were easy, we wouldn't need to keep on doing all of this. And these three methods are reason. We should always begin with reason. Mind training, and looking or scrutiny. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about the use of reason when it comes to fear. And I don't find this easy. I mean, I can actually feel right now my fear of what's going on, my anxiety. When I look at my fear, I have to ask myself, or I do ask myself, the question, what is its effect? What does it do? In other words, what good am I doing by being afraid? Am I doing any good at all? Yes, I am. I wear a mask, I social distance, I wash my hands, and I have OCD to begin with. So, I mean, imagine my hand washing. I mean, it's like, you know. So, that caution is constructive. It is reasonable. We should be afraid of infecting others, being infected ourselves. We should be afraid of our elders and other people at high risk getting sick. And so that's one of the reasons why I mentioned that fear itself is not regarded as a cause of suffering, it's a state of suffering. Fear, while it can be paralyzing, and we'll get to that in a second, is not necessarily a bad thing. You know, you should be afraid of running out into traffic. You should be afraid of doing those things. But if you know you're not going to run out into traffic, it does no good to sit there at home shivering and shaking with fear that you might run out into traffic, because you've decided you're not going to. So therefore, what is the appropriate response to fear in terms of reason? To come to decisions. Make reasonable decisions. I am going to wear a mask. I am going to wash my hands. I am going to social distance, you know, for the protection of others and myself. And once I've decided that I'm going to do those things, then fear has done its job. It has caused me to appropriately alter my behavior. Now, the hard thing for me, because I suffer from chronic anxiety and depression, the hard thing for me, and I think for many, many other people, even those without, you know, is knowing when to stop being afraid. How much fear is too much, you know? So, the first thing, now originally when I designed this, you know, I knew it was all remote, but I was still thinking of it as guided meditation, and there will be some later on. Although I guess people will be doing it in their living rooms, bathtubs, bedrooms, wherever they are. I mean, okay. How many people, you can't answer this because I don't see you. Sometimes we'll watch Dharma lectures lying in bed. Now that it's remote, I do it. Okay, just, you know, we're supposed to sit up and, so the first thing that I want to, you know, and I kind of want to emphasize this, is that fear is neither our friend nor our enemy. We want enough fear to change our behavior. And then it's done its job. Then we have to learn to let go. So the way that you can do this is at that point, you say to yourself, okay, now it's time for me to meditate. It's not time for me to shiver and shake in fear of what's going to happen tomorrow or the next day or the day after that. I am taking steps in my life to behave appropriately, to make changes, wearing masks and so on. And now I don't need to think about that. Now I'm at home, I'm in my shrine room, my bedroom. My bedroom is my shrine room, so it's like, and it's not time for me to worry. It's time for me to pray or meditate or, Buddhists often don't seem to like the word prayer, but when I actually look at what I do, we say meditate. Yes, I'm going to meditate now. I'm a Buddhist. We meditate. Most of it is prayer. Even if I'm imagining myself as a deity, I'm reciting that mantra. Those mantras are prayers to the deities. They're invoking them by name and so on. Personally, and this may just be me, I get a lot more immediate benefit, I think, out of praying to my guru, praying to these deities, than I do out of just meditation. Now, I try to meditate also. I'm not very good at it, but I try. But the whole thing is, I think prayer is important, but okay, that's not our topic. Are there any questions yet? Because I want to... They don't know? All right, well, I'll go on. All right, well, because I want to stop intermittently so people can get a break and I can get a break. All right. So, the first tactic or technique in dealing with fear is reason. And that should be fairly clear, but if people want to ask, I'll jabber on endlessly. The second thing is mind training. Now, there are countless amazing things about Buddhism. But of all of them, one of the ones that constantly blows me away is Mahayana mind training. And the reason for this is that unlike many Buddhist practices, you can actually do it. You can actually use it. We're not going to become a Tisha overnight, but, we can actually do something. And in working with fear, I think that it's good to use the mind training slogan, 3 objects, 3 poisons, 3 roots of virtue. Now, I did say that fear is not one of the kleshas, but is a state of suffering. That's not exactly true. If we pursue it to its generally fear, the affect of fear is a state of suffering, is part of the truth of suffering. But the cause of fear is definitely a klesha. So how would you use this? Just to briefly remind you of the meaning of that particular line in Jeko Yeshe Dorji's text. We are almost always, when we're conscious, in a state of reaction. Which is to say that we are constantly surrendering our power to objects. And by doing so, by responding unconsciously to objects, we give our power to our kleshas. Whenever we encounter something we like, something we want, a blue sky, nice trees, hearing that there's a vaccine, whatever. I mean, any of this, it's fundamentally the same thing. It's not necessarily that everything we want is bad, but whenever we encounter something we want, we're pulled. We're pulled. You can call it desire, attachment, craving, whatever you want, but we're pulled toward that thing, toward what we think it is. Whenever we encounter something we don't want, the bad news, sickness, horrible events, things that make us sad and so on, we retreat. We are averse to it. Now, aversion sounds a lot less extreme than anger or hatred, but they're fundamentally the same thing. And whenever we encounter something that neither gratifies nor threatens us, we're apathetic. We don't care. We don't care. Now, one of the most helpful things I ever heard His Holiness the 17th Karmapa say, and I think it was at Harvard, but I may be wrong, and I'm not just name dropping, when we were at Harvard. He said, most of us think that anger and or hatred is the world's biggest problem. But he said we have a problem even worse than that, and that is apathy. It is our apathy, our lack of concern. So those are the three objects, the three poisons. Now, how do they become three roots of virtue? Well, you don't suppress them. You don't do anything except you expand your concern to include others. And this is where, it's not really complicated. It's a little complicated to explain. This is where the borderline between the fear that is our friend and the fear that is our enemy really lies. You remember that I said that while fear itself is largely regarded as an aspect of the truth of suffering, its cause is the truth of the cause, and that is self-fixation. Now, we love to use the term self-fixation, false identification. We have all these terms, and they don't hurt. What we're talking about is selfishness. The cause of our being pulled, the cause of our being pushed away, and the cause of our not caring is selfishness. I know this because I am, and I'm not trying to con you with false modesty. I am a selfish SOB. I know it. I see it. I see my thoughts. I know what's going on in there. It's not pretty. Just be glad you can't see it. And so when you take selfishness out of the picture, these three poisons are no longer poisons. So how do you do this? Well, let's talk about fear, because that's what we're talking about right now. When I feel fear, it's usually directed at fear for my daughter, myself, other people I love. But then if I think, okay, right now, hospitals all over, we're just going to talk about COVID here. Hospitals all over the world are full to bursting of people who are not just afraid, they're actually suffering intensely from this disease, and in some cases, they're dying. What about them? Yeah, I might get sick. People I know might get sick. I mean, I do know people who've had this, or know of them. But never mind might, there are people dying right now. People sick unto death right now. Why should I fear for myself? I should fear for them. Fear is fine. There's a lot to be afraid of, but I should fear for those who are in the greatest danger. Who are living in hotspots, who are unable to social distance, who first responders, essential workers, the elderly, people at high risk for other reasons. If I'm going to fear, all right, I'm going to fear. I have an anxiety disorder. There's no way I'm going to be without fear. I guarantee you. I will be afraid every conscious moment from now until I die. But if I'm going to be afraid, okay, let me be afraid. Fine. Let me be afraid for them. That's the reason to be afraid. That's why I wear a mask. For other people, It actually helps us too, the wearer, but, And then the last step is think about how much fear, terror, those people are experiencing right now. May only I experience that. Okay, I'm going to be afraid. I accept that. I can't get rid of it. My anxiety thing, it's just not going away. And it's hardwired in there, or, something. But, okay, then if I have to be anxious, if I have to be afraid, they don't. Let me fear for them. Let them be free of fear. Okay, there's a third step, but I want to stop there, if there are any questions. I can't fill 2 hours. I mean, it's just too long. Otherwise, we can go on and then I finish the whole thing today, which is okay. I mean, why not? All right, okay. So, the first technique in dealing with fear is reason. Determining what, yes?
Yeah, there is. Thank you, Lama. Sure. Okay? Yes. Thank you, Lama Yeshe. Can you speak to addiction and OCD at these times? Is there any specific things that can help when you're stuck in the obsessiveness and anxiety?
That's a very good question. I was thinking about that this morning. There are a few things. First of all, I would say reason, in the sense of what is the result of this behavior? Do I want to continue this behavior because I know what it leads to? So if you could be talking about substance addiction, you could be talking about the addiction to negative thinking, addiction to fear itself, addiction to all sorts of things. The first step, really is reason. Okay, I've seen where this leads, whatever this is. Each and every one of us has a this. I have seen where this leads. It always leads to the same place. Do I want to keep going there? And you'll only change when you decide, no, I don't want to keep going there. It's dead end. I don't like it. You know? And of course, that's in general. In dealing with, let's say, counterproductive thought processes, substance addiction, food addiction. I mean, I'm incapable of moderation in anything. I will overdo anything. You know, sometimes I've overdone good things, but mostly bad things. You know, it's much easier to overdo bad things than it is good things because it's, you know, it's downward. So, you know, an example, a big example for me is food. You know, there are things we can live without, but you can't live without food. And that makes it very, very hard for me to control the amount I eat, obviously. You know, I mean, it's like, because, well, everybody knows this. We all deal with it. Now, the second part of your question was right now, in this state of crisis, where all of our, you know, we're alone a lot. Many of us work remotely. And it's very easy to slip, you know. It's very easy to use food or alcohol or tobacco or video games or, you know, in my case, Scrabble. Scrabble's a real, it sounds good, virtuous. Oh, I'm just going to play another game of Scrabble. That's fine. Yeah, but, you know. So it's very easy. You know, I realized when I was a teenager that when I'm being addictive, I want something. Doesn't matter what it is. Could be sugar, could be alcohol, could be food, could be an entertaining book that's effortless to read, could be a TV show on Netflix, but I want something. Well, what is that something that I want? I want to be distracted. Distracted from this underlying pain that I have. Anyway, so in this situation where there are, additional stress, additional opportunity for slipping, you have to, again, use reason. Firstly, what I said before about dealing with addiction in general, whether it's physical or mental. But then secondly, you have to apply a special type of reason now, which is you have to make rules for yourself. And you have to make those rules based upon what you have discovered about yourself. It's like, I will let myself play Scrabble for 1 hour, no longer. Same thing. I will eat at certain times. I will not snack in between. You simply have to make these rules, and the way to stick to them is observing what happens when you don't. Because when I disobey myself, my own rules, I feel really lousy. I don't feel good. I don't feel happy. So it actually is worse than obedience. If I listen to my own common sense, then I feel better. So that's what I would say about addictive behavior in general. Now, when it comes to OCD, I've mentioned this many times. I was really only diagnosed with OCD in my 30s, after I had already done 2 3-year retreats. And I definitely was symptomatic with, depression and anxiety from the earliest age. But in the 60s, when I grew up, we didn't talk about it. And when I became Buddhist, I made a mistake that a lot of depressed Buddhist practitioners do, which was I mistook my depression for renunciation, or the desire to be free. Now, the thing about depression is depression disguises itself as superior intelligence. When you're depressed, you feel that you see things as they really are. That other times you're deluded, or you're, intoxicated by transitory spectacles or whatever. But now I see it, the world is bad, and I'm bad, and things are going to get worse, and and that it's very hard to argue with yourself when you're really depressed. And at least in my case, some people that have anxiety or depression, mine go together. They're just like, it's an obscene reference, but it's like the unity of of mind's lucidity and its emptiness. That's my anxiety, depression are an indivisible unity, but not a good one. And I mention this simply because, to answer your question honestly, without medication, I'm hopeless. I started taking medication for OCD when I was 42, 43, and I stopped it unwisely at times when I thought I was better. And I thought, well, I've established new habits, neuroplasticity, bada bing, bada boom, the whole thing. No. It's life and death for me. This is life and death. And I refuse to deceive anyone who suffers from this about my own experience. I can't speak to anyone else. I'm not a psychiatrist, but, for me, it's a physical thing. It was wired in, So that was that question. Any others?
Yeah, actually now. Sorry, I put on mute. Is it on now? Okay. There are quite a few questions, so if we don't get to all of them now, then
We'll just keep on going, and then, yeah.
the afternoon session will carry on. So now, it's not working? Okay. Thank you for addressing the issue of fear as a possible klesha or cause of kleshas, and acknowledging that fear is a state of suffering. ... So I'm not sure if that's a question or not.
Well, I think that fear is a state of suffering that is symptomatic of the klesha of selfishness when it is a klesha. I don't know what bodhisattvas or Buddhas experience when their concern for others is probably the equivalent, but it's not the same. It doesn't have that poisonous, wouldn't. Is that it?
All right. Sorry, I'm trying to get this because if it's too close to me. Okay. Oh yeah, that's better. How do I meditate best for a Rinpoche's health? See him in my prayers as Guru Rinpoche and then doing medicine Buddha. I imagine the Buddha in front of me, but I'm also praying for his health.
Anything, really.
Yeah.
I think anything. It's the concern, the love that matters.
Somebody's saying, all right, let's do this, and then if you have a longer question. How do we develop the habit of remembering other people's suffering while we are suffering? That's a good one.
Yes. Some people actually use visual reminders. For meditation, they'll write, "Don't be distracted" in big letters on their wall, or these Mahayana mind training sayings like 3 objects, 3 poisons, 3 roots of virtue, and so on. So you can do that. It's really, habits are difficult to develop in the beginning and easier as they go on. But I think if the thing that's important is not to exclude yourself from your compassion. His Holiness talks about this a lot, or has. You're a sentient being too. It's not a sense of I shouldn't care about myself, I should only care about them. It's like we're all in this together. We are all in this together. People are suffering to different degrees at different times, but we're all in the same fundamental situation. And a sense of shared experience can help.
Okay. Can you talk? Sorry, I'm just making sure I'm doing this one at a time. Can you talk about the techniques for expanding unconditional love to all sentient beings? Yeah, you've done that. All these techniques that are particularly beneficial in times of crisis.
I think that both Bardo Rinpoche and Lama Trotop have very clearly taught here in different contexts that you can't jump into unconditional compassion for all beings. You have to start where you are, where you're starting. So you start with cultivating a compassion for the person you love most. And in fact, you can't even start by cultivating compassion for them, because compassion is predicated on love, the desire that they be happy. Compassion is therefore wanting them not to suffer. So I think you need to start by cultivating love and then compassion for one person, and then expand it. I mean, we know whom we love. Start with the person you love most, be it a parent, a child, whatever, and expand from there. I don't think it can be done, because if we do it as a generality, it's very abstract.
So I never understood why Dharma teachings didn't address the issue of fear. Is there some reason, language related, that Dharma teachings didn't specifically address the problem of fear and anxiety?
I wondered that myself. I think it might be because they're attempting to transfer our sort of ongoing fear from mundane concerns into fear for the distant future and so on. And so there's kind of almost, at some point, especially in the common vehicle, the fear is actually encouraged. Fear of lower states and all that kind of thing is a motivating factor, which of course is very controversial in modern days, but I think that's why.
Yep, I think, and that's it. And I don't
Okay.
know where the message went. They said, I've got a question, but
All
it
right.
was in one of
Well,
the medias that I don't know where it went.
all right. So we'll continue. So what we looked at a little bit in the beginning was the relationship between faith and knowledge and the need for both. One thing I would add to that is that knowledge without faith is very sterile. It really doesn't seem to do us much good. And then we've spent, I guess, most of the last hour talking about working with fear. And I went through two approaches of reason and the Mahayana mind training. The Mahayana mind training approach is pretty much going to be something of a common theme. The third way of looking at fear, of working with fear rather, is to look at it. Now, we have to be careful to be precise in our language, because normally if I say look at fear, it means look at what I'm afraid of. But that's exactly the opposite of what we're talking about here. We're talking about looking at the fear itself. The fear is simply the shape that your mind is taking at that moment. One of the things that we do, and this won't get rid of the fear. We're not trying to get rid of the fear. If you're trying to get rid of the fear, it won't work. But one of the things that can help is that usually when, I'll use myself as an example, when I become particularly afraid, through obsessive thinking or through reading the news, which I've had to limit, I'm not looking at the fear. The fear is kind of like an MC, a master of ceremonies, who's trying to get me to pay attention to the entertainers. And the entertainers are the things I'm afraid of. But things you're afraid of and fear itself are different. They're very different. And the deception of fear is that it makes us lose that distinction. So we make a false distinction between, we fail to make a distinction between the object of fear and the fear. And I'll give you a specific example of this. And then we make a distinction that is false. So for example, let's say, I have the thought, I didn't wash my mask this morning. Maybe it won't work. And there's a feeling of fear. It's physical. When I experience fear, I can feel it in my knees. I can feel it in my belly. Sometimes I'll shake, actually. That fear, that mental and physical, and I don't want to get into, for our purposes, the distinctions between mind and body, but let's talk about body-mind. The fear in my body-mind is me. It's not other than me. And the object of fear, the thought that maybe there are, COVID germs on my mask or whatever it is, That's different. That's a speculative idea. So one thing I can do, and I don't want to push this idea because it can be distorted and sound too highfalutin, but basically one thing you can do when you experience heightened fear is look at it. Because the actual fear concentrates you in a certain way, or it can distract you, but it can concentrate your mind. So that the third thing to do with fear is look straight at it. It's your fear. It's you. It's not, it's not actually coming from outside. The speculation is concerned with externals, maybe, but it's there. Okay.
Here's one more question.
Good, because that's really the morning.
Yeah, okay. So, all right, so thank you, Lama Yeshe. You talked about faith earlier. Let's say 95% of people of faith have faith in other religions. Is this similar to Buddhist faith, and should we rejoice in their faith?
I think we should rejoice in their faith. I am in no way qualified to assess whether their faith is the same or I think definitely we should rejoice in faith. I don't, I think the last thing we need as Buddhist practitioners is to become sectarian and judgmental.
Now questions are coming in. Can you please clarify what you mean by looking at the shape of fear? Is this possibly related to the 5 aggregates, meditation using fear, question mark? Is shape the same as experiences of fear?
When I used the term shape, I was being metaphorical, and I meant that fear is the way your mind is manifesting at that moment. Of course, it doesn't actually have a shape. Okay. First of all, any emotional state is maintained. It's caused by various things, habits and whatnot, but stimuli and so on. But it's maintained as a chain of thoughts. Moods are made up of thoughts. And so, all these images are going to be misleading if they're taken as solid or literal. But it's almost like thoughts are packets that carry that mood. So we're talking about fear. So let's say I give rise to a thought of something I'm afraid of. That thought is not going to stick around. It can't. But if my habit of being afraid is strong enough, it will cause that thought to produce another one that is similar to it. And that will produce one similar to it. Now, they're not the same thought. They seem to be the same thought because they're similar, but they're not the same thought. Each thought is different. And so the only thing that keeps that chain of thoughts from, continuing is a habit. Without habit, the first thought will disappear, and then that's it. Another one will not reoccur.
All right. It seems, sorry everyone. It seems there are 2 kinds of human suffering that appear as mental suffering. I wonder if some sufferings, such as depression and anxiety, or the compulsion of addiction, are organic in cause. And just she goes. It seems the human body is capable of creating terrible suffering that is not optional. This is not easily remedied with mind training practices.
Yeah, I agree. That's exactly what I've experienced. That's why, I try to practice as best I can, and I take my medication every day.
I understand. So now this is the next one. I haven't been mentioning people, so I just won't.
That's fine.
Yeah. I understand your point about expanding the poisons to include all beings, which seems to imply expanding one's fears to limitless proportions. Taking on others' fear with our own invariably, some words I just stumble on, so yeah, inevitably.
Inevitably.
Inevitably. There we go. Sorry, everyone. Inevitably. Yeah, it makes sense. But how does that not become paralyzing if taken to ultimate conclusion? My impression is more skillfully to face the reality of fear without playing into its endless storylines.
Well, first of all, we don't expand the poisons because they're not poisons if they're not selfish. So we expand the response to stimuli. So in other words, if I walk outside and I see beautiful flowers, instead of thinking, I want those flowers, I think, wouldn't it be nice if everybody all over the world could see beautiful things like this all the time? And that's not a poison, that's an aspiration. In terms of the storyline, you use the word storyline, that's very important. You don't indulge the storyline. The storyline is the thought. Now, you can make aspirations. May nobody ever have this disease. May nobody ever fear this disease. So on. But that's not a storyline. That's an aspiration.
If the reason fear and anxiety, not specifically addressed in Dharma teachings, was not language related, could it be culturally related? Our current culture compared to historical Buddhist cultures?
That's possible. That's possible. That's possible, but I don't know. I don't know.
Next one. What do we do about the anger we feel towards the administration for not managing the pandemic better? This outrage is consistently being fed by the media, and we can become obsessive about it.
The best thing to do is not dualize, not to think of friends and enemies, but to pray for everyone. That's the best thing to do.
Okay, then going back, the organic suffering that requires medication to overcome seems different to me than the mental clinging that happens when our minds are allowed to run to discursive thought.
Yes, that's my experience also.
Okay, she said, please comment on these ideas.
I agree. I mean, that's but I mean, I can recognize certain types of thoughts that are stereotypic OCD thinking. But over the last 20 years, we've come to recognize that the symptoms of OCD, to use that as an example, because it's what I've got, it's about all I've got, is OCD. The symptoms are much broader than we thought. It's not. I mean, there's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of little, funny little things that are now considered part of that. And, this is, when we're talking about an actual illness, we can't really generalize too much. I mean, that, you need, if you're like me, you need really smart psychiatric advice.
Sorry, and I didn't realize she continued on this. Is it better to rest and simply witness the depression, the grief, and work with it in that way rather than attempt to change the organic state that with practice or training?
The advice that I've received from my teachers is attack these things from every direction at once. Medication and meditation. And if there are organic changes that need to be done, then do it. I don't think we should be hard-headed about this. In other words, saying, well, I can, I'm a Buddhist, I practice meditation, I only need to meditate, and that should overcome this. Well, then you wouldn't need to eat. It's the same thing, really. I mean, His Holiness Rinpoche used to say this: if you think that the physical things don't matter, then stop wearing clothes, stop eating. You don't need those.
Should I go on to the next one?
Yes, please.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on going to a therapist? Can that sometimes actually strengthen your self-cherishing attitude?
I have, at times, consulted, is that the right word? 3 different therapists during my life that I can think of, maybe 4. And I suppose if the practitioner, in other words, the therapist, is good, it should help, not harm. But it's like therapists, they're not the same thing as lamas by any means, but it's like there's good lamas and bad lamas. So there are good therapists and bad therapists. You go to a corrupt spiritual teacher, you will come out worse. You will. Same thing with a therapist, I guess.
In addressing His Holiness's comment. Oh, okay. In addressing His Holiness's comment about apathy, can you expand on his recommendations beyond practicing Dharma? Did he talk about social and political engagement in any sense?
Yes, that was the context. He was talking about climate change, not only, but the address or talk that he was giving was about climate change. And in addition to talking about how destructive apathy is, because we just don't take care of stuff, because we don't care, we don't think it's going to affect us. He talked about the fact that we're all connected, we're all interconnected, and when climate change is hitting certain places before it hits others, but I don't think it's a coincidence that we have this disease now. And I don't know, but I'm not a scientist, but all these things are happening because we're not taking care of stuff. And we don't take care of stuff as a species because we don't care unless it's right in front of our face. Now, His Holiness used an example that day that he used other times. He said he was in, I think he was in a chapel, big, beautiful chapel. And he said, if I said to you, a tiger is coming in that door, you would all immediately respond. But he said, if I said to you in 50 years, a tiger is going to come in that door, you think, well, we got time, we can deal with it later, you know. And he said there's something, he used the word wired, the English word. He said our brains are wired strangely in that we ignore dangers unless we perceive them as imminent. So yes, he was talking about social and political engagement.
Okay. So I love the way your aspirations are phrased. Breathe. Thank you for the discussion about fear. Is this a fair summary of one of your points? Fear is an emotion that is the result of speculative ideas?
It can be. I think fundamentally fear, our tendency to fear is a result of our, selfishness, self-fixation, whatever. And then fear is exacerbated by speculative thinking, yes. Can be.
All right. Most therapists do not really have a clue. A doctor has such insight of great knowledge, dedication, and compassion are present. I don't
understand the sentence.
I'm going to go on because I
Okay.
thought I might have read it wrong, but
Okay.
I don't think I did. Can you talk about devotion for one's guru as an antidote to fear? That is not to say that reason does not operate, but I do find that helpful to experience my mind and guru's mind intermingled.
If you can do that, then that is, as we always say, the universal panacea. But, and it's individual. If you have such devotion for your guru that you can actually experience the mixing of their mind and yours, then you may not need much else.
I believe the talk that His Holiness gave that Yeshe is referring to was at Yale. This
Could
is
have been. He
a
talked about that
This is
there.
videoed of the talk, yeah.
Okay, all right. Could have been. I can't remember. There was one at Yale, there was one at Princeton, and there was one at Harvard. Yeah, maybe it was the Yale one.
Should I go on?
Yes, please.
It gives me a broader outlook, and this dissipates fear and decreases paralysis of fear. I don't know, there's some words I just can't say. Sorry, everyone, I'm visual, so sometimes talking is hard. Anyway, that was the continuation of the guru.
Okay.
Okay. All right, next one. There are a number of Buddhist therapists out there. Here, now, I recently had a session with a 35-year-old practitioner that his clientele is mostly people in the arts. She was terrific. I think she's replying to the question before
Oh, okay.
about,
Yeah.
Yeah, and then it was just, this is not a second, just everyone saying thank you.
Oh, okay.
I'll show you the chat afterwards, so you can see everyone's comments.
Oh, okay. All right. So are we out of questions?
I think so.
All right, then maybe we should stop and dedicate the merit. So we could do the short dedication on page 7 this morning and then the full long one this afternoon.
There is one question.
Okay.
I couldn't get it on chat. It's on my face.
Okay, that's fine. We can wait. We can do it. Oh, that's fine. We're not in any hurry. I mean, we're doing good time.
Using the term look at it obviously does not mean to use your eyes. So we are back to mind viewing or considering mind. The instructions for that are varied. Would you give some simple specifics?
to keep it simple and, not be grandiose or highfalutin or exaggerate. One of the things that Trungpa Rinpoche said about this is that one of the things about our mind is that the mind is not hidden from itself. Your mind can experience itself. We're in the habit of neglecting it, of ignoring it, of looking everywhere else. But your mind can experience itself. I'll stop there with that. You have one.
Anxiety. Anxiety is the fuel of my negative behavior. Can you talk about the... All right. Anxiety is the fuel of my negative behavior. Can you talk about the antidote to anxiety through practice?
Well, I can only talk from my own experience, which, is what it is. The two things that have helped me the most in my life so far in dealing with anxiety are, first of all, as I said before, the correct medication, particular medication, correct dosage. And praying to, in my case, praying to Guru Rinpoche. That's it. That's all I know.
Why does the isolation make some people become mentally unhinged while other people seem to thrive?
You got me. I have days where I'm thriving and days where I'm mentally unhinged. So I don't know. We are all in the same boat. I can even be mentally unhinged at one point of the day and then thriving at another point. I don't know. I don't know.
So precious your sharing your heartfelt being away from the refuge of solely intellectual, such a revelation and healing. Okay, no question. And then just somebody with LOL, laughing out loud.
Oh, yeah. Well. Is that it?
You want to wait just 2 seconds?
Sure.
Sometimes you think it is, and then...
Yeah.
Also, why it takes longer is there's a time lapse.
Oh, I know.
Okay, I think this is it.
Okay.
And if any more come in, we could do it this afternoon.
Yes. Okay. So let's dedicate the virtue. Sunam diye tamje zikbanye tonenye pe ranam pamjene cheka nachi balap trupai sipe tsola dowa dowa.